Hey, economics students, it's Friday. Happy Friday. I hope you had a great week. I'm looking forward to the weekend. I know you are too. So today's lesson is going to be, again, pretty short one. I don't have any extra videos or anything. So we're going to wrap up market failures this week, and then I'll talk a little bit more about next week here in a second. Before I do that, I just want to remind you that if you haven't already, there is an ed puzzle about externalities that I'd like you kiddos to do as an assignment this week. Because again, externalities are one of the more complicated a little bit, but not only complicated, but they're some of the most common types of market failures, and it's important to understand those. I also want to remind you that I do have here in our Google class a copy of our Chapter 7 uh, slides that I've been doing. And what I've done in those slides, I've gone in and I've actually embedded different YouTube videos to try to help explain some of the concepts. So if as we go, a lot of them, like market structures, are just pretty straightforward. This is what a market structure is. These are the characteristics. But as we get into a little bit more complicated graphs, more complicated concepts, I uploaded some videos of either me explaining things, or you'll see from market failures, I actually embedded the different videos that help explain those market failures. If I'm just a little bit helter-skelter, these videos, this young lady, I'm assuming she's young, I don't know, but whoever this person is who did this, she does a really nice job. Um, and then the only other thing I wanted to go over before we do our, oh, what's going on here? Before we do our next, the very final market failure, next week, Ashland High School is starting a new structured schedule. So every period, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, 2 days a week is going to have a 2-hour block. And so you're going to get some information, I think, today or over the weekend about this. But essentially on Monday, um, second period, I don't have a first or third period, but my second period class, you will see me on Monday. We'll have a 2-hour block where you and I can interact. Now, what that means for the way I'm doing things, I'm still going to do things the way I've been doing them. I'm still going to make videos. I'm just going to make less of them. We're going to do 2 videos a week, all right, because I'm going to get to see each one of your classes 2 times a week. So I'll do a video on Monday and with a lesson, and then on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I'll get to see you in a 2-hour block where maybe we can look at the lesson together. Maybe I will show the video in person, or maybe I'll just answer any questions you have about the video or the assignment. And then on Wednesday, I will post the second video, the second assignment. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, when we meet, we'll go over that in that 2-hour block of time. Now, we're probably not going to be, for the entire 2 hours just on a computer screen. Um, I mean, I don't know. If we are, we are. That's great. And if it's helping and if it's working, that we're going to be communicating for 2 full hours, let's do it. I have a feeling, though, after about 30, 45, 60 minutes, you might be getting a little bit tired of Mr. Court's economics lessons. Um, I know, shocking. But I don't want to overwhelm you. Things are still going to be the same. All right, still going to post videos, still going to have like Ed Puzzle assignments, Google Form assignments. It's just we'll have a 2-hour block of time where we can interact face to face, and you can get some face to face help on any of the content that we're covering. And if you don't log in to the Google Meet at that 2-hour block, no big deal. All right, you can still in the evenings look at the videos, do the assignments, shoot me an email, just like we have been. But for some of the students who are having a harder time structuring their day, this will help you structure your time a little better. You'll have 2 hours where you can just worry about my class. And really, for one of my lessons, you should be able to watch the video and get any of the assignments that I would have for that video would easily be able to get done in that 2 hours, I would think. I'm not going to, yeah, we're going to keep doing the same thing. It's just instead of posting 4 videos and having 2 assignments, I'm going to post 2 videos with 2 assignments, and it'll slow things up a little bit, but it's not like we're going that fast to begin with. All right, so yeah, just wanted to let you know that. So let's go ahead. Let's move into our last example of a market failure. We've gone over markets fail to allocate resources when they're imperfectly competitive. Markets fail to allocate resources well when there are externalities. Yesterday we learned that markets fail to allocate resources well when they need to produce public goods and services. Today we're going to do the last sort of broad topic, and we call it asymmetric information. All right, and here's the interesting thing about this last market failure. These in the first three, there is a lot of in all of these, to help solve the market failure, there is usually a need for some government intervention. And nowadays, our politics is so polarized that we seem to have two extremes. There are some people who say government intervention is awful, it's bad, government bad, markets good. And then on the other extreme, you say markets are awful, markets just the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, markets are bad, government's good. And the reality is that you really need some combination of the two. And when you look at externalities and public goods and imperfect competition, people have different perspectives. There are some people who think every good has a negative externality, so we need to have more government intervention. Or there are a lot of goods with positive externalities, so we need more government intervention. Other people say, no, that negative externality isn't that big of a deal. We don't need huge taxes to fix that. That can be addressed with market solutions. So there's always argument over, it's not so much that there shouldn't be government intervention, it's how much. The one thing about this final piece of the puzzle with market failures is that this is usually one that is not overly debated. Like when there is what we call asymmetric information, typically the fixes for asymmetric information are relatively straightforward, and most people can agree on this. There's not quite as much debate as there can be with externalities on the role of how much government intervention is needed to fix things. So to go into asymmetric information, all right, the word asymmetric is kind of odd. Asymmetric, the word symmetry, or if something is symmetric, that means it's usually equally balanced, or there's two sides that are identical to each other. All right, so like for example, um, as human beings, we generally judge a person's looks based on how symmetric their face is. If your left part of your face and your right part of your face are relatively symmetric, especially like your jawline, um, typically people find you better looking. And that's why, like at a certain angle, like if on a scale of 1 to 10, sometimes in the right light, if you sort of Photoshop my face, I can almost pull off a 5 because my jawline's kind of symmetric. If I get my nose just right, you don't realize that my nose is all weird. All right, so I can pull off a 5, but then boom, you do this, I'm down to a 2 because my head is sort of weird. It's sort of pointed off in one direction. And then if you look at my ears sort of flop out in different directions. So because the parts of my face that are symmetric can, in the right light, make me look like a 5. Not bad out of 10, right? And who knows? But you can see that my bald head, ugh, it's not symmetric. There's a difference. There's one side is not the same as the other. So that's what asymmetric means. It means that there's two ends of something and one is not identical to the other. And as a reminder, we believe in economics that when possible, the most efficient way to allocate resources is through using perfectly competitive markets where there's many producers, homogenized products, equilibrium price, firms are price takers. We've gone over that. It's easy to enter and exit the market. We've gone over that. The one key, another huge key to a perfectly competitive market is that both consumers and producers have to have total information about the economic transaction. Consumers need to know exactly what it is they are going to consume. Producers need to also know exactly what it is that consumers are able to bring to the table when they're consuming a product. That's a little bit of a trickier concept. We'll get into that a little bit later. Oh, look, I'm highlighting these. That's nice. All right. So what happens if a consumer does not have complete knowledge of the product that they are buying? What happens is that they are not accurately able to understand or predict the utility that product will give them. And that means they're either going to buy more of it than is socially optimal or less of it than is socially optimal, because consumer demand is all based on utility. Well, mostly based on utility. That a consumer demands products because they get some sort of a benefit from a product. So what happens though if producers do not have complete knowledge of the product they are buying? Um, Oops, sorry, I should say have complete knowledge of the product that they are producing, not buying. Producers produce. Well, they will not be able to establish their cost of providing that product. And this is a very unique circumstance that we'll get into here in a second. So some examples of how markets fail to allocate resources when consumers have too little information. This is very easy to understand. Think of, I'm going to give you three examples, like a used car. When you go and buy a used car, you I mean, there are online programs out there. It's easier now to get information than before, but a lot of times you don't know the history of that used car. You don't have complete knowledge of that used car, how many accidents it's been in, how the owner prior to it took care of it or didn't take care of it. And so it's hard for you to really understand the utility that that used car is going to get to you or give to you. And so that is why the government has created what are called lemon laws, that a car dealer cannot sort of lie to you about the car that they are selling. They can't tell you that it's one certain thing or has a certain amount of miles and then really it has more miles, but they've rolled it back, or that it's been an accident and if the producer or the car dealer knows that, they should disclose that information. So if you buy a car and find out that the information that you were given when you bought it was faulty, sometimes you have the ability to get your money back through lemon laws. A lemon is sort of like a car that you get that is, sour. It's gross. You don't want it and because you thought you were getting an apple, you're just getting a lemon. So again, uh, the idea of used cars, if you don't know what you're buying, sometimes you think you'll get more utility out of it than you normally would, which leads you to demand it more, which leads to a higher price. I also want you to think of the concept of a snake oil salesman. A snake oil salesman, this is sort of an older term, that there used to be people who travel the countryside with their quote unquote, their potions and elixirs, their snake oils. And they claimed that these elixirs and these potions could help cure all sorts of diseases. And and if you as a consumer, if you're walking through the grocery store and there's this big display in the middle that says, hey, here's, this awesome new drug, and it cures diabetes, it cures cancer, it cures all these terrible illnesses. Um, and and there was no mechanism for you to really know if that's true or not, you might buy into it and be like, wow, I need to buy this drug. This is going to help save my life. It might save my whatever, my mom's life, my brother's life. This is a great drug. I'll be willing to pay whatever for it, because you don't really know that it's not accurate, that it's snake oil, that it's just some charlatan who's putting crap in a bottle and trying to pretend that it's it's good for you. So that would cause you to demand the product more than you should, because you don't have the information about what it really is. Um, and that is why the government has highly regulated pharmaceutical laws, that if you are going to get some sort of a prescription medicine, it needs to come from a doctor. Likewise, all medicines, over-the-counter medicines, prescription medicines, when you buy them, you see on the packaging all the ingredients. They have to list the side effect. They tell you what the proper dosing should be. It has all sorts of information to make sure that you know what you are getting, and to make sure that what you are getting is actually something that is supposed to help you medically. Because if not, you might be spending a lot of money on snake oil, stuff that isn't making you any better. And what that does is that takes those resources, that land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship that is used to make snake oil. You are consuming it, not getting any benefit, not getting utility, when instead those resources could be used on something else that could provide utility. And another big one, food safety. If you look at any food content, any food item, you'll see that there are, like, here's just a little pack of cashews. You can see that every pack of cashews, even these little tiny ones, I ate it, they have calorie contents on them. They have the fat content, the saturated fat versus, polysaturated fat, all that stuff. And the reason being is that if you aren't sure of the nutritional content of what you're eating, you might be, buying things and eating things that are really unhealthy for you. And if that's the case, it's going to cause you to get sick. It's going to cause you to get obese. It's going to cause you to do all sorts of things that could cause you to have to pay a lot of money to doctors or to get healthy in the future. So that is why the government says we need to have nutrition labels. And all products, I should say most products that you consume, like literally digest, that you put into your body, are going to have some sort of nutritional labels. And a lot of them are highly regulated by the government. There has to be a certain type, has to be a certain font, it has to be in a certain layout, it has to have certain nutritional guidelines and facts on it. That way you and I know what we are consuming. We can better gauge the amount of utility from that product. An interesting scenario where the QWERTY keyboard is kind of like a market failure due to a lack of information by consumers. So this is interesting. I don't know if you probably know the term QWERTY keyboard. This is a keyboard, and a keyboard does not have letters put here alphabetically. All right, they are put in sort of this random order, and we call it a QWERTY keyboard because the first five letters are QWERTY, QWERTY. And it's an interesting story why we have a QWERTY keyboard, because studies have shown this is really a crappy way of putting letters together. I mean, putting them alphabetically wouldn't really be good either, but there are certain letter placements that make a lot more sense when they're put next to each other, opposed to how the QWERTY keyboard is. What's really interesting about this keyboard, the reason we have it is that back when typewriters were first being created, all sorts of different producers were creating different types of typewriters. Each one of them was getting patents on their typewriters, and different typewriters had different letter combinations. And just to sort of I'm going to cut through a lot of the history. Essentially, the person who developed the QWERTY keyboard was able to convince a lot of the people of our country that this was the most efficient keyboard to use. Eventually, the reason it was, the studies showed that it was at the time, was because the only people who were being trained to type quickly were being trained to type on QWERTY keyboards. So the QWERTY keyboard producers could say, hey, look how many words per second or words per minute these people can type on a QWERTY keyboard. No other keyboard can do that. Well, that's because nobody was being trained on other keyboards, because if they were, they could have been more efficient. Studies have shown that. So because consumers did not have the information, they didn't know. They said, oh, wow, you mean you can type whatever, 100 words a minute? Wow, that's amazing. I'm going to get these QWERTY keyboards. These must be the best. These are the cat's meow. And the reality is that they weren't, because consumers did not have the perfect information. And now it's just a thing. It became the standard keyboard, not because the government said so. There is no government edict that says that every keyboard has to be a QWERTY keyboard. It's simply because of inadequate information. Back when the typewriters were first coming out, people just assumed, because everyone that the QWERTY keyboard was the most efficient, so everybody bought QWERTY keyboards. Everyone adapted their keyboards to the QWERTY layout, and now that's what it is, even though it's a crappy layout. Well, I shouldn't say crappy, but it's not as efficient as it could be. And then finally, and this is kind of interesting too, there is a situation where producers have an imbalance of information, where the consumers actually have more information than producers have. And probably the best example of this is when we talk about insurance. So the way insurance works, if you drive a car, you know this because you have to buy car insurance. It's the law. And when you buy car insurance, you agree to pay a certain amount every month to your insurance company. It's called a premium. So you might pay $200 a month or $300 a month to the insurance company. And what happens then, if you get into a car accident, you do not have to, well, you might have to pay a little bit, but if you get into a car accident, your insurance company pays for a majority of your costs. So the idea is you're paying a little bit here and there to an insurance company so that if you do ever get into an accident, which hopefully none of you do, but if you do ever get into a bad accident, you don't have to pay a $50,000, $60,000 bill. The insurance company will do that for you. So here's the deal though, if the firm, the actual insurance company that is providing the service of insurance, if they don't know how well their drivers drive, so like when I'm paying my premium to my car insurance company, they are predicting I'm going to drive in a certain way. They don't know if I'm a good driver or a bad driver. They just have to guess. And if I'm a worse driver than they guess, it's going to cost them money because they are selling me a premium based on their assumptions of how good or not good that I drive. And the issue arises is that if there wasn't, a national law or a state law, I should say, in Ohio that you have to have car insurance, what might happen is that only the people who drive dangerously would actually buy car insurance. So that would mean that the insurance companies would be insuring people thinking that they're just, you know, average drivers, when in reality, it's only the dangerous drivers who are buying insurance. We call that adverse selection. I'm going to show you how that works here in a second. The other issue that sometimes happens is when people have insurance, sometimes they're more likely to act dangerously. So I might normally be a very safe driver, but because I have car insurance, I realize, hey, if I get into an accident, I don't really have to pay for it. I'm paying these premiums to an insurance company. I'll go 5, 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. You know, the actual having the insurance might actually change my behavior. We call that a moral hazard. But I'm going to go back to adverse selection. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and start a car insurance company. So I am a producer. I am a firm. I am producing a car insurance company. And here are 10 teenagers. All right, it's Mr. Court's Teenage Car Insurance Company. These 10 teenagers just got their license and they each one just got a car. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so what I am going to do, I'm an insurance company and they are all going to pay me some money and I got to figure out how much money should these people pay me. All right, now understand it is way more complicated than the way I'm going to make it. And if you're interested in this at all, like actuarial science is a really interesting thing that studies how to determine risk amounts and all that good jazz. But regardless, um, let's say that studies show that 10% of teenagers get into car accidents and the average accident costs about $10,000. All right, so what that means is I'm insuring 10 people and I know there's a 10% chance of a car accident, so I can assume that one out of these 10 students are going to get into an accident. And that accident's going to cost me about $10,000. All right, so again, I predict one accident, 10% of 10, it's going to cost about $10,000 to pay out. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to set my premiums at $1,100 a person. So I'm going to have each one of these people is going to pay me $1,100 with the understanding and the agreement that if they get into an accident, I will pay the cost of the accident. All right, that's how insurance works. So each one of these people is giving me money. In exchange, I agree to pay for any damages that occur if they get into an accident. So let's see what happens. Again, we have $1,100 per person. So if my prediction is accurate, I am getting a revenue of $11,000, meaning each one of these students is paying me $1,100. So that's 1,100 times 10, $11,000. So let's go ahead, let's say, oh, one of our kids, like predicted, gets into an accident. That's sad. Look, he's sad, but he's good. It was just an accident and everyone's okay, but he has a $10,000 bill, and because I have an agreement, I'm his insurance company, I am paying that $10,000. So my revenue was $11,000, my costs were $10,000. That means I made $1,000 in profits. Perfect. That's how it's supposed to work. I am providing my capital. I'm providing my labor. I am taking all of these things and producing a product, which is insurance. So I should gain some profit from that. All right. That's how car insurance works. Now, what happens though if my predictions were wrong? What if because you understand or because you're teenagers and you think, well, Mr. Court's dumb, I don't like Mr. Court, so I'm going to drive really dangerously, whatever. What if there's adverse selection and instead of just one person getting into an accident, my predictions were wrong. I predicted every one of you are going to drive like average drivers, meaning one of you would get into an accident, but it turns out you're all a bunch of crazy teenagers driving crazily, and it turns out that instead, two of you get into an accident. Now all of a sudden, my revenue is still $1,100. All right, because again, revenue is all 10 of you paying me $1,100, so 10 times 10 is $11,000. Now though, I am paying for two accidents, and each one is $10,000 apiece. Now I am paying $20,000. uh-oh, I just went bankrupt. All right. So again, that's how markets can fail if producers don't have accurate information. And it's mainly in industries and services like the insurance industry. But it's again, it's a very interesting concept. And generally speaking, most people, even the most like conservative people, um, think that the government does have a good role to help make sure there's accurate information, to make sure that when you're buying something and selling something, that buyers and sellers have full information of what they're buying and selling. And usually the cost of ensuring that for companies isn't too prohibitive. It's not like you're being taxed a ton of money from the government. It does take resources and costs to print labels and stuff. Not, I don't want to downplay that, but it's not quite the same as being taxed. It's not quite the same as being regulated in terms of how you make a product. Usually, when the government comes in to make sure people have full information of a product, most people, this is the one time where most people agree the government plays a vital role in making sure markets don't fail. When it comes to externalities, when it comes to public goods, there's a lot more gray area to debate. And there's gray area here too, but not as much. All right, so today then, if you haven't done your Ed puzzle, make sure you do your Ed puzzle. And then there is also a little bit of a quiz that I'd like you to do. It's open note. Feel free to use the Google Notes that I've provided for you. I just want to get a feel for how well you understand market failures. It is graded. Like if you miss some questions, I will dock points, but it's not going to be a one-for-one dock. It'll be sort of um, curved. So if you missed a couple, it's not going to hurt your grade that much, but I will grade it for accuracy to an extent. All right. All right, everyone. Have a great weekend. I look forward to seeing you on Monday. And if you're in my second period class, we might actually be seeing each other face to face live through Google Meet. All right. Bye, everyone.